And now we're gonna start seeing different specific aspects that we can use and how to use them. And the first one is position, because we've already talked about it and is the first one. So we're gonna see some examples on how theories of change use position and the advantages or disadvantages of doing so. Okay, so for example, we have a typical way of representing theories of change is also this one. You see, they have the inputs, they have the activities, the outputs, the reach, the outcomes, and impacts. They don't have results between the activity and the outputs. And we're not focusing on the content. So you see, the logic is not vertical, it's horizontal to the right. It's okay, totally understandable, and that's a perfect way to do it. So this would be another handmade version of us. However, as you have probably guessed already, my favorite way to do it is vertical. In this case, is from top to bottom, which is also an option. But I usually do it more on this way. I like to put the activities at the bottom and the impact at the top. Why is that? So first of all, it's a metaphor, right? Like the objectives are high to reach, maybe. I think it's more organic too, because usually there's a lot of activities or there are more elements at the bottom at the activity level than at the impact. So it looks like kind of a mountain or something like that. It feels more organic than the other way around, more stable. And then compared to the horizontal logic, to going from left to right or the other way, I've realized, or in my experience, in order to play with arrows later and also in order to craft the text that is often very different. Sometimes we have long sentences and sometimes we have short ones. It is more practical. I cannot explain you exactly why to do it vertical than to do it horizontally, because then, I don't know, it's more difficult to follow, while looking up is more natural to me for follow the logic. It's hard to explain. It's probably a personal choice, but I prefer this way. Now, going back to this example, we can observe already two new things. The first one is that we obviously use the vertical logic, so the activities are at the bottom and the impact is at the top. And the other thing we can observe is that we didn't respect the ratio information divided by ink, right? If we remove the decoration, and the mountain was a decoration that we can use if we want to, for some reason. But if we remove it, now we have the Venn diagram. And there we can see that we have the log frame impact and the log frame outcomes and outputs. And then everything in the middle are intermediate results to the activities. But there are other ways to represent the same thing. And again, a lot of decoration in this one, and my dear iceberg that I use a lot of times. But this is the same content than before, increasing the teacher's salaries to better quality of teaching and to better performance to improve education. But here, as you can see, we have used the pathways in a different way. So they're more or less respecting the same logic, but we are playing more with the connections between them. And this is using a horizontal logic, kind of, from the left to the right, although it goes up and down at some points. Also, it's a way to represent and to remind us that intermediate results are often not explicit, and here we make them explicit. Now, I wanted to bring back this example to tell you that, talking about position, once we have our diagram positioned the way we want it, we could also, if it is a simple logic like this one, we could also combine the diagram with text. And it could be the narrative, like the mechanisms are telling us the narrative, but also like the mechanisms are explaining better how the change happens or is supposed to happen. But we could also include the assumptions, which are an important part of the theories of change that are often in another page, but we can bring it to the diagram by these means or by others that we will see later. But it's also, the position is telling us at which level they're placed, right? You see, for each levels of results. Now, either if you use the vertical or the horizontal logic, you could use position, for example, what is in the middle, to represent what's more important. It's not often the case, but we could. Yeah, maybe ideally, once you have your pathways, if you have one that is more important than the other, maybe you could move it to the center. and similar way with horizontal logic, or even for the level of results. And you will see something like that at some point. Just reminding that maybe one area of the diagram, position again, can be more important than the others for whatever the reason. Okay, we're still talking about position. So we see this theory of change that is fake, that is a mock-up because the results are not there, where we've seen that we have organized the impact or the results according to SDGs, to Sustainable Development Goals that were relevant to this organization. We'll talk about it later, but we see that the colors are helping us to pack these pathways in around different thematics, but the position, what is on the right is building towards SDG 17, what is in the center is building towards SDG 2, and what is on the left is towards equality. This is another possibility of using position. As you can see, and we'll see it later, in this case the colors are redundant with the position. We could remove them because we already see towards which SDG we're pointing at. But often pre-attentive features can be redundant just to make sure the message is more clear, and in this way also it helps the diagram. So this is a real example. Again, the arrows respect the colors, so it's easier to follow. But we're looking at position. So in this case, this theory of change that you know, emergency preparedness and response, we had the response and the preparedness sides. So the position is helping us understand which part they're in, and also we added the background to kind of group them up. Now this is another template where we use a vertical logic and we include bottlenecks, which is often interesting, and then we have the strategies and the intermediate outputs and the outputs and so on. Position related is that here the central part of the diagram where we have the outputs were more important to UNICEF, to the organization, because that's where they keep their accountability level, right? They are accountable until their outputs. That's the way they look at it, and it's like that for many organizations. They're not accountable for the outcomes because there are many more factors involved. Anyway, we picture this area with this background to say that this part of the diagram, the results that are in this area, in this position, are more important. Now, another thing that we could use the position for would be to map results across time. And so imagine we have this theory where some intervention starting on year 1 and some expected results, and then also intervention 2, but the results are longer and the outputs are even longer to wait for, ideally, or what we expect. Then later that year we start intervention 3 that has another output that takes quite a long time to consolidate, then there's going to build on to outcome 2, and then in year 2 we're going to start intervention 3 that will be into another output and will contribute to output 3 in a couple of ways. We could use that. I've never seen it. It means has to be very light, or we have to make the fonts very small if we're putting this way a fairly complicated one, but could be done. And as you can see here, we use the horizontal logic, but again, we could have used the vertical one. And that's a little bit about position. So if we want to practice, you can check a theory of change that you have and take a look at the position feature. And also you can do or redo a theory of change that you know or that you have using position in a more purposeful way. And that's it for now. See you in the next lesson.